He had the ring in his pocket. The suit was pressed. The flowers were ordered. And 3 days before the wedding, a stranger pulled up to his worksite, rolled down his window, and said 4 words that changed everything. "You need to see this." He looked at the photo on that stranger's phone for less than 10 seconds. 10 seconds, that's all it took to unravel 2 years of his life. And here's the part that will stay with you long after this video ends. That photo wasn't what he thought it was. But by the time he found that out, she was already gone. If you're new here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We release new stories every week, and you do not want to miss what's coming. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Dean Harlow had spent his entire life in Kearney, Nebraska. Born there, raised there, and for a long time he figured he'd die there too, and not in a sad way, just in the way that some men are built for a specific patch of earth. He ran the overnight shift at the grain elevator off Route 30, 32 men under him, a beat-up Ford F-250 that he'd owned since he was 22, a farmhouse on 4 acres that still had his father's boots by the back door. He wasn't rich, he wasn't flashy, but he was steady, and in a town like Kearney, steady meant something. He'd been engaged once before, years ago. That fell apart quietly, the way things do in small towns, more drift than explosion. After that, Dean didn't date much. He told himself he was fine with that. Then, Lily Reeves walked into the hardware store on Main Street where she'd just taken a job, handed him the wrong grade of bolt for his fence project, and somehow made him laugh about it for the first time in years. Lily had moved to Kearney about 8 months before that, said she needed a fresh start after things got complicated back east. Dean didn't push for details. He figured everyone deserved the right to start over. She was warm, careful with her words, the kind of person who remembered what you'd said 3 weeks ago and asked about it. She brought baked goods to his crew on cold mornings. She learned the names of his neighbors' dogs. By the end of their first year together, Dean Harlow, a man who had quietly accepted a life without partnership, had become someone who couldn't imagine one without her. He bought the ring on a Tuesday, proposed on a Wednesday on the back porch with no ceremony, just the two of them and the sound of the wind moving through the cornfields. She said yes before he even finished the sentence.
3 days before the wedding, Dean was finishing up an early shift. The ceremony was Saturday. Small, 40 people. Lily had insisted on that. No fuss, no spectacle, just the people who mattered in a rented hall that smelled like wood polish and old hymnals. Dean was signing off on a delivery log when one of his guys tapped him on the shoulder. "Some fella out front asking for you. Doesn't work here." Dean walked to the gate. The man was maybe 50, weathered face. He wore a plain gray jacket and kept the engine running like a man who expected to leave quickly. Dean didn't recognize him. "You Dean Harlow?" the man asked. "Who's asking?" The man said his name was Ray. He said he'd driven from Columbus, Ohio. He said he wasn't there to cause trouble, and then he held up his phone. "I think you need to see this before Saturday." Dean almost walked away. He almost said, "Whatever you're selling, I don't want it," and turned back to his clipboard. But something in the man's voice stopped him. It wasn't threatening. It was almost sympathetic. He looked at the phone. The photo showed a wedding, white dress, flowers, a church with tall windows, and the bride, standing at the altar, mid-laugh, face turned toward the camera, was Lily. Dean's throat tightened. "When was this taken?" he asked. His voice came out flat. 14 months ago, Ray said. "Columbus, Ohio. She was using a different name then, but that's her." Dean stared at the photo for what felt like a long time. 14 months ago, Lily had already been living in Kearney for 6 months. She and Dean had been together for 2. He handed the phone back without a word. Ray left a printed copy on the seat and drove away without another word. He didn't call her right away. He sat with it, turned it over, tried to find the logical explanation that would make the tightness in his chest go away. Maybe it was a different woman, a coincidence. Lily wasn't a unique face. But he kept coming back to the laugh, that half-tilted laugh with the eyes closed just slightly. He knew that laugh. He'd spent 2 years studying that laugh. He pulled out his phone and looked at every photo he had of her, scrolled back to the beginning, her first few months in Kearney, how she'd always been just slightly guarded in the early pictures, a smile that seemed to be deciding how much to give. He thought about the things she'd never talked about. Family. She'd said they were complicated, gone mostly. He hadn't pushed. Her time before Kearney. She'd said a rough few years. He hadn't pushed. An accent that was almost nowhere, but occasionally slipped into something vaguely mid-Atlantic when she was tired or upset. He'd never asked about it.
He called her at 7. She answered on the second ring, warm and easy, talking about centerpieces. He said, "I need you to come over tonight." Something shifted in her voice, a pause that lasted just a beat too long. "Is everything okay?" "Just come over, Lily." She was there in 20 minutes. He slid the photo across the coffee table without a word. She looked at it for a long time. When she looked back up, her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying yet. "Dean, just tell me what I'm looking at." "It's not what you think." "What I think," he said slowly, "is that you were standing at an altar with another man 14 months ago, while we were together. I know how it looks, but I need you to sit down and let me explain all of it, please." He didn't sit down. Later, he would think about that, the fact that he chose to keep standing. "I can't do this 3 days before our wedding," he said. "If you'd wanted to explain it, you had 2 years. Dean, listen to me. Is that your wedding?" Silence. "Is it?" She closed her eyes. "Yes," she said, "but I need you to understand why. There are things about my life before Kearney that I was not allowed to tell you, not wouldn't, not couldn't." He heard the words, he processed them, and he did not understand what they meant, not really, but he was too deep inside his own hurt to pull back and look clearly. He said, "I think you should leave." She said one more thing before she walked out. "Don't tell anyone about that photo, Dean. Please, for your safety and mine, don't tell a single person." He didn't understand that either. He told himself it was manipulation. He locked the door. She was gone by morning. No text, no call, no note at her apartment when her neighbor checked. Just gone. Her car still in the lot behind the hardware store, a half-drunk mug of tea on her kitchen counter, gone cold. Dean drove to her apartment, drove to the hardware store, drove to every place she'd ever mentioned. Nothing. He called her phone, and it went straight to a number not in service message. Not voicemail, not ring then voicemail. The number had been disconnected overnight. He filed a missing persons report. The officer took it down with a careful expression and said they'd look into it. 2 days later, the day that was supposed to be their wedding, Dean Harlow sat in his farmhouse, in his work clothes, and tried to understand what had happened to his life. The flowers were paid for, the hall was booked, 40 people had been called and quietly uninvited. His foreman asked if he was okay. He said yes. He was not okay. 3 weeks passed. Then a federal agent knocked on his door. Her name wasn't Lily Reeves. It was Claire Maddox. She had testified against a mid-level organized crime operation out of Columbus, Ohio, in federal court 3 years ago. Distribution network, money laundering. 2 men went to prison.
Those men had people who were still free. After the trial, Claire Maddox was placed into the Federal Witness Protection Program, relocated, given a new name, a new history, a cover identity built carefully and quietly around a new life in a town where nobody would look for her. Kearney, Nebraska. The wedding photo, the one Ray had shown him, was a cover document, a fabricated identity record created by the U.S. Marshals Service to give her a traceable backstory in case anyone ran her name. A fake marriage to a fake man in a fake ceremony that never happened. It was not real. None of it was what it looked like. Dean's mouth went dry. "The man who showed me the photo," he said slowly. "Ray." The agent nodded. "His real name is not Ray. He was sent to find her. He'd been looking for almost a year. He didn't know where she was until you." Dean felt the floor tilt. "I didn't tell him anything." "You didn't have to. He showed you the photo at your workplace, in your name, at a location she had no connection to publicly. When you confirmed you recognized her—" "I didn't confirm." "You took the photo, Mr. Harlow. You stood at that gate for 90 seconds. That's all he needed. He had eyes on the parking lot. Her car was there. Her name on the hardware store schedule." She had known in the moment she saw that photo what it meant. She hadn't been caught in a lie. She had been located. And when Dean told her to leave, she'd had maybe 6 hours before they found her building. The marshals had pulled her out before midnight. "Where is she now?" Dean asked. The agent looked at him with a kind of professional sympathy that was worse than coldness. "I can't tell you that." "Is she safe?" A pause. "She's safe." The agent left a card, told him to call if the man named Ray made contact again, told him not to discuss the details of their conversation. Then he was gone. Dean sat there for a long time. He thought about 2 years of dinners, of mornings, of the way she'd memorized the name of every man on his crew. He thought about the last thing she'd said at the door. "Don't tell anyone about that photo, for your safety and mine." She had known. Even then, hurt and standing in his doorway, she had been trying to protect him, and he had locked the door. 6 weeks later, a letter arrived with no return address. 1 paragraph, her handwriting. "You were the only good thing I was allowed to have. I would have told you everything on our wedding night. I had permission. I was finally going to tell you all of it. I'm sorry the wrong person reached you first. Don't look for me. It won't work, and it isn't safe. I hope you find steady ground again. You deserve that. C." He didn't know her real name until he read that letter. Claire. He said it out loud once, alone in that kitchen. It was the first and last time he'd ever speak it. He had been 3 days away from the truth. She had been 3 days away from finally telling it. And a stranger with a photograph and 90 seconds of silence had swallowed those 3 days whole, and left him with a name he could never say to anyone who knew her, and a life that was whole enough to hurt. If this story hit different, give it a like. It genuinely helps this channel reach people who need stories like these. Subscribe if you're new. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think she made the right call leaving without a full explanation, or did Dean deserve more? I'll see you in the next one.